Alright, what's going on, guys? EGM coming at you with a brand new video, and today I'm going to be giving you my preview for the New York Giants going into the 2017 NFL season. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so last year the New York Giants finished with a record of 11-5. They were second in the NFC East and were awarded a wild card spot in the playoffs, where they lost in the wild card round to the Green Bay Packers. But aside that, it was a really good season for the New York Giants, and the first time they had made the playoffs since 2011, the same year that they won their last Super Bowl. So the Giants are definitely coming into this season with some momentum. But let's talk about their strengths and weaknesses and some of the leaders on offense and defense from last year. So we're going to start off with the offense. Last year, Eli Manning threw for a total of 4,027 yards, 26 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, and completed 63% of his passes. The leading rusher for the team was Rashad Jennings with just about 600 yards, 3 touchdowns. Paul Perkins, who was a rookie last year, chipped in also with about 450 yards and also picked up 162 reception yards. So it was about 630 yards that Paul Perkins racked up in total scrimmage yards. And the leading receiver for this team was actually Odell Beckham, who actually finished in the top 3 for receiving yards last year. He racked up 1,367 yards with 10 touchdowns. Sterling Shepard also chipped in with 700 yards and 8 touchdowns. But even with some of the success that the New York Giants had offensively last year, they weren't too high up in the rankings. They ranked 17th in terms of passing offense, 29th in terms of rushing offense, and were ranked the 25th offense in terms of total yardage. But with that being said, that leads me into the strengths and weaknesses of this offense. So let's look a little bit deeper. We're going to start off with the strengths. Now, the first strengths on this team is the wide receiving core. Obviously, they have one of the top 3 receivers in the NFL in Odell Beckham. They have Sterling Shepard, who was really productive in his rookie season last year. And this offseason, they go and they sign Brandon Marshall from the New York Jets, who last year caught just under 800 yards. A majority of the reason why he wasn't as productive as many of his other seasons was due to poor quarterback play from Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, last year was only one of 3 times throughout his entire 10-year career that he has not reached 1,000 receiving yards. So he is a very efficient receiver. He's very tall, stands at 6'4", very fast, great hands, an excellent pickup for the New York Giants. Even though he's 33 years old, he still has quite a bit left in the tank. And with the new acquisition of Brandon Marshall, we may very well be looking at the best receiving trio in the National Football League. So that obviously points to the fact of this receiving core being a strength of this football team. Now, another strength on this offense is the offensive line. This offensive line is coming off a year in which they were ranked in the top 3 as an offensive line and only gave up 22 sacks, the 3rd fewest in the entire league last year. So although many might question this or question that offensive line, I think it's pretty solid. I think you got 2 excellent starters in Justin Pugh and Weston Richburg. Eric Flowers still hasn't come along the way Giant fans want him to, but I mean, this is still a pretty good offensive line, and I think it's an offensive line that many other teams would like to have. Alright, so now let's talk about the weaknesses on this offense. Now, the first weakness that I want to point out is at the running back position. Now, this New York Giants rushing attack was ranked 29th last year. Rashad Jennings was the starter. Eventually he lost his job to Paul Perkins. They do have Shane Vereen on the roster. He was injured last year. He's coming back. Now, they did add Wayne Gallman, the running back out of Clemson, this past draft to add some depth to this unit. But right now, the New York Giants just need a consistent running back to help Eli Manning out and be on par with this passing attack. Now, the New York Giants need to find a workhorse running back. Now, going into the season, Paul Perkins is going to be the starter. Some people are rolled by the struggles that he's been having in this first preseason game. But one of these running backs, whether it be Shane Vereen, Wayne Gallman, Paul Perkins, and maybe even Orleans Darkwa, need to step up, because imagine how scary this New York Giants offense would be with the great receiving core that they have, as well as a dominant run game. Another weakness or question mark that I have on this offense is the tight end position. Now, they did lose their starting tight end in free agency, Larry Donnell. They brought in a bench tight end from Minnesota, Rhett Ellison, and with the first round pick that they had in this past draft, they used it to draft Evan Ingram, the tight end out of Ole Miss. So the Giants are obviously looking to fill the void at the tight end position, and I expect Evan Ingram to be of high usage early on. It's just a matter of whether or not he's going to be able to produce early on in the season. Now, obviously, there's time for him to develop in the coming years, but until that time comes, until we see whether or not he's going to be a good tight end in this league, that position is a question mark. But I will say that the New York Giants took a step in the right direction when they drafted Evan Ingram. Now, let's get into this defense and the leaders from last year. Last year, Landon Collins led the team with 125 total tackles. He also recorded 4 sacks and 5 interceptions. It was just a complete breakout year for Landon Collins, in which he made his case as a top 5 safety in this league. Olivier Vernon led the team in sacks with 8.5. Jason Pierre-Paul also chipped in with 7 sacks himself. Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie led the team in interceptions with 6. And Janoris Jenkins also had 3 interceptions. But let's get into this a little bit deeper and look at the strengths and weaknesses of this defense. Now, the first strength of this defense is the secondary as a whole. We look at the 2 cornerback positions. The 1 and 2 positions are set with Rodgers-Cromartie and Janoris Jenkins. They also have a young corner still developing in Eli Apple. They did lose some veteran experience this offseason with Leon Hall, but they did sign Valentino Blake to provide some depth. And also included in the secondary are the safety positions. Landon Collins is an absolute beast, as I mentioned earlier in the video. This past season, with the stats that he put up, he made his case for being a top 5 safety in this league. And the guy's only 23 years old, so he's only going to get better. And the strong safety position is set for the New York Giants. Now, the only question mark I would have in the secondary would be the free safety position. Now, Darian Thompson, the 3rd round pick from a 2016 draft, won the starting job last year. Missed the majority of the season with an injury. He's back this season. Now, the Giants really liked what they saw from him, so that would be the only question mark that I have with him coming back this season. But assuming that he does return to the form in which the Giants were impressed with him, I think that it's only going to make this secondary better and just solidify this New York Giants secondary as one of the best in the NFL. Another strength on this defense is this defensive line. They have Jason Pierre-Paul and Olivier Vernon holding down the defensive end positions. 2 absolute masters when it comes to rushing the quarterback. They also have Damon Harrison, who is one of the best run stoppers in the NFL. They did lose one of their defensive tackles in Jonathan Hankins this offseason, but in this past draft in the 2nd round, they used their pick to select defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson out of Alabama. And even with the absence of Jonathan Hankins, you still have 2 great defensive ends, 1 great defensive tackle, some solid depth on the line, making this a strong core to any defense. Now let's get into the weaknesses. Now, the only weaknesses I see on the defense has to be in the linebacking core. Jonathan Casillas and Devin Kennard are the 2 starting outside linebackers. Albeit Jonathan Casillas did have a pretty solid season. He recorded over 80 tackles. But between those 2 outside linebackers, they only combined for a total of 2.5 sacks. So there isn't really any pressure off the edge coming from the strong and weak side. And now we move on to the inside linebackers. BJ Goodson is presumed the starter and doesn't have that much experience on the field. Last year he was a rookie, played a majority of his minutes on special teams, so he doesn't really have any experience in terms of starting at the middle linebacker position in the NFL. I mean, he did step in a few snaps as a substitute linebacker, but like I said, not much experience. And alongside him is another special teams player in Mark Herzlich. So you got 2 guys that have played a majority of their snaps on special teams and have not really solidified themselves as legitimate middle linebackers at this level. But that's what opportunities are for. These 2 guys are going to have opportunities to show that they have what it takes to be able to start at that position in this league. But there's just too many question marks surrounding that position and those 2 guys. So because of their inexperience, that is going to be one of the weak spots on that defensive unit. But nevertheless, as a whole, it is a great defense. And I think the talent that they have on the defensive front, as well as in the secondary, is going to make up for the lack of talent that they have in that linebacking core. But now let's get into the schedule and record predictions. Now, I'm going to start off by saying that the New York Giants are going to win the NFC East this year. But it is all going to come down to Eli Manning. Eli Manning has a tendency to turn the ball over way too much. This past season, he threw 16 interceptions. Now, just to show you how careless Eli Manning is with the football, Eli Manning has not thrown less than 10 interceptions since his rookie season. And in his rookie season, he didn't even start all 16 games. He has thrown over 20 interceptions 3 separate times in his career. So he does have a tendency to turn the ball over quite a bit. But once he's hot, he's hot. I mean, we've seen that in the 2007 season when the Giants snuck into the playoffs, made it to the Super Bowl, and beat the New England Patriots, who at the time had just came off an undefeated season, undefeated in the playoffs, looking to be the 2nd team ever to go 19-0, and the New York Giants pulled off the upset. The same thing happened in the 2nd New York Giants Super Bowl run in 2011. They made the playoffs, they got hot, and Eli Manning beat the Patriots once again in the Super Bowl. So once this guy is on, he's on. There's no stopping him. You just never know which Eli Manning you're going to get. So my predictions are based on the good Eli Manning. If Eli Manning comes into the season prepared, knowing that he has an opportunity to make a deep playoff run with this stacked football team, I think we're going to see a really solid Giants football team and a really good Eli Manning. So if what I believe does actually come into existence and Eli Manning does show up this season and doesn't turn the ball over as much, which is a lot to ask of him, by the way, then I do think the New York Giants are going to win the NFC East, as I said, and be one of the teams contending for a Super Bowl. But let's look at the schedule really quick. I think the Giants start the season off on a 3-game win streak. They beat Dallas, Detroit, and Philadelphia. Tampa Bay hands them their first loss. They then proceed to beat the Chargers, lose to Denver, and beat Seattle. So 7 games into the season, they're 5-2. They head into the bye week. After the bye week, I think they beat the Rams, they beat the San Francisco 49ers, they lose to the Chiefs, they beat Washington, they lose to Oakland, they lose to Dallas. I think they beat Philadelphia, they beat Arizona, beat Washington, and end the season on a 3-game win streak. I think they win the division, as I said earlier, and finish the season with an 11-5 record. Now, this is my preview for the New York Giants 2017 season. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment down below, and stay tuned for more content.